Hi everybody, welcome to Sunya and again welcome back to the Environment High Yielding Topic Series. Today I'm going to start with the important acts and legislations. This is the part 1, okay? And there will be some other parts where we'll be covering the important acts. Now in the initial parts I will cover the acts which have had amendments, okay? Like for example in this particular part we are going to cover Wildlife Protection Act, okay? So here I'll be covering both things. One, I'll be including the static component of Wildlife Protection Act, but yes, more important is the amendment part of it. So we'll be seeing both parts, okay? So number one, we have seen a lot of questions on Wildlife Protection Act, okay? So we need to do it. Second, the year is 1972 and as you see it has crossed 50 years, okay? So again, this can become, let's say the amendments etc. They can ask you a question on this, okay? So here in this mind map, if you see, I've divided the static part of this into 4 components. One, what is the objective? Initially, how many schedules were there? What was the purpose of schedules, etc. Then we'll see what bodies are constituted under this act. And lastly, we'll see how many different protected areas get a recognition under the Wildlife Protection Act. Alright, so let's begin. As the name says, the objective will be very clear. This act basically was enacted for the conservation of wildlife, okay? And in doing so, what it does, there is a scientific authority in it, there is a management authority in it, okay? So there are both scientific authority and management authority in Wildlife Protection Act, okay? Additionally, it is helping to implement the provision of CITES. CITES talk about how to prevent this trade of the endangered species. It's a convention on the trade of endangered species. So we enacted this to be following the provisions of the CITES. And by the way, when I tell you the recent amendment, then also it has been done so as to closely align this act with the provision of CITES. CITES is the year 1973, okay? So even the year you can also recognize the year here, okay? That's one. So Wildlife Protection Act 1972, okay, CITES, that is one. Now objective we already know. Now very important is schedules. So initially in the act we had 6 schedules, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, okay? And this is important because we'll also compare what has happened. So the first 4 schedules gave a degree of protection, okay? So the highest degree of protection was in Schedule 1 and Part 2 of Schedule 2. It had the highest degree of protection, right? Then you had Schedule 3 and Schedule 4, okay, wherein you had lesser degree of protection, but nonetheless the protection was there, okay, to the animals, to the birds, to the plants. And by the way, some of you get confused whether plants are included. Yes, plants are also included in the Wildlife Protection Act. 5th was vermins and 6th was plants. So I'll start with 6. So if a species or something is added in Schedule 6 etc., what it means, one needs a license to cultivate that. That is Schedule 6, okay? What is Schedule 5? Schedule 5 is known as vermins. What is the concept of vermins? Vermins, let's say in Bihar or let's say in Uttarakhand, the population of nilgai in a particular time increases to the point that it actually endangers the life of farmers. It becomes a nuisance, okay, and it threatens, let's say, the agriculture produce. Then the state governments with due provisions and due, let's say, permits can declare that species, okay, include, let's say, fruit bats, okay, some rodent, nilgai etc. can be declared as a vermin and they can be hunted for a specific period of time, okay? It's not that they can be hunted indefinitely, okay? After some point of time they can be stopped, okay, because let's say the population is controlled, fine. So that is known as a vermin, okay? And from 1 to 4, highest degree of protection in 1 and Part 2 of Schedule 2, then 3 and 4, okay? So these are the schedules. It is almost similar to how there are appendix in CITES. In CITES you have appendix 1, 2 and 3. In the similar manner we have schedules, fine, in the Wildlife Protection Act. So far what we know, we talk about the objective to save the wildlife, okay? And by the way, saving the wildlife includes preventing the trade, preventing them from getting hunted, illegal wildlife trade, etc. So that is the core component of Wildlife Protection Act. Now, these two are very important things. I'll start firstly with 4. This gives a legal recognition excuse me, to protected areas like, so there are 5 protected areas to which it gives legal recognition. 1 is national parks, 2nd is wildlife sanctuaries, 3rd is tiger reserves, 4th is conservation reserves, and 5th is community reserves. Okay, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, tiger reserves, conservation reserves, and community reserves. Now, people who are watching this video, in the comment section, please tell everybody how many tiger reserves are there in India, and then Google how many national parks and how many wildlife sanctuaries. Okay, if you keep seeing this, that gets better ingrained in your memory. 2 more things: conservation reserves and community reserves. Fine. Conservation reserves, see, is the conservation effort on a government owned land. Okay, whereas community reserves, as the name says, the community is going to participate in the conservation in the land owned by the community. So there's a difference: government owned land, community owned land, right? So community reserves and conservation reserves. And when I say conservation reserve, now maybe your mind goes to Dugong Conservation Reserve in Sea of Gulf of Mannar, Tamil Nadu, Vikramshila Conservation Reserves for Gangetic dolphin, right, in Vikramshila, Bihar. So this way you can also understand, okay, this is a conservation reserve. So this is a part which, or it is on a land which is owned by the government, right? So number 1, then the 5 protected areas you should know. Then even more important is the statutory bodies, or the bodies created under this act. Okay, and by the way, if you like understand this act in this holistic manner, this will make your job very easy. Now, number 1 is National Board for Wildlife. Then you have National Tiger Conservation Authority. You have Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, and you have Central Zoo Authority. Okay, I'll again repeat: National Board for Wildlife, National Tiger Conservation Authority, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, and Central Zoo Authority. Okay, so number 1, you need to know the statutory bodies. Now, just quickly, I'll just briefly explain all these bodies in a very short manner. Okay, because I also plan to cover these bodies separately in the high yielding topics of bodies. Okay, then I'll do this in more detail. Right? So here, National Board for Wildlife, number 1, chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister. Okay, and this is the apex body, okay, for the conservation of wildlife. National Board for Wildlife, right? If a species has to be added to a species recovery program, which is also known as Integrated Development of Wildlife Habitat, you need NBWL's approval. Okay, and there are other functions and provisions that I'll discuss in more detail when I discuss bodies with you, right? So that is National Board for Wildlife, headed by Prime Minister. NTCA, National Tiger Conservation Authority, headed by Environment Minister, right? So whatever is to be done, let's say with respect to tigers, if a tiger reserve, the approval, etc. has to be done, if the state government has to think about setting it up, you have to consult National Tiger Conservation Authority. Okay, right? Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. Okay, now it collaborates with state governments, with international different governments, NGOs, other intelligence and crime agencies, right? And it is very famous for some of its operations, including Operation, let's say, Save Kurma for turtles, okay, Operation Clean Art for mongoose, okay, Operation Birbil for birds, so on and so forth. We'll see more operations in the subsequent lectures on high yielding topics, right? And the last is Central Zoo Authority. Now, zoo is a ex situ mode of conservation. There are 2 modes, one is in situ, one is ex situ. What is in situ? In situ is the conservation which is happening in that area, in the local habitat of that organism, okay, whereas ex situ is outside. So let's say you do captive breeding, okay, or you put somebody in a zoo, that is known as ex situ. So the management, scientific conservation, better practices, etc., all of that is under the Central Zoo Authority. Okay, so far we have seen objective, we've seen schedules, we've seen the statutory bodies which are set up, and we have seen the protected areas which are designated under the Wildlife Protection Act, right? Now this is the most important part, amendments which are to the Wildlife Protection Act, right? The amendments, now this is a part which is important from the current affairs perspective. So I have listed out all of the important amendments which have come, right? And this we will be like now understanding this one by one. Okay, so number one thing that we have is there is a rationalization of schedules. This is the first part. Now what does this mean? We've already seen initially you had 6 schedules, right? Now from 6 I have 4 schedules. So number one, schedules have declined. Okay, they've reduced. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now 1 2 3 4. First 4 have now become first 2. So first 4 initially, I'll just write down initial so that you guys don't get confused, and this is amended. First 4 were related to conservation. Now 4 have been reduced to 2. Vermins has not been included. Plants is included. So 3 here is plants. So 6 here has become 3, and 4 is for implementation of sites. Okay, so that because we wanted to implement the provisions of sites in a better manner. Okay, so rationalization of schedules has happened. So initially it was felt that the schedules were too many, which again hampered with the conservation. Think of the forest officers, at least at the most ground level, they might be not available of which schedule animal is this, what are the different schedules, and we wanted to better manage them as per the provision of sites. So we have reduced it or rationalized the number of schedules. Now it also speaks about controlling the alien invasive species and the control of alien species and all the provisions related. The power lies with the central government. Okay, so it is the central government which has the power to control the alien invasive species. Again, when you read about biodiversity or alien or these species, for example, Prosopis juliflora, water hyacinth, Parthenium, right? And there are many charu mussels, etc., etc. So these are very harmful for the biodiversity. So it says that there should be provisions to control the alien invasive species, right? And while conserving or let's say saving the biodiversity from the alien invasive species, the power would lie with the central government. Now this is very important, right? So that is one part that we need to know. Now again, moving ahead, now you see control of sanctuaries. So there is a wildlife warden which will be appointed by the state government. They will be ensuring the management and control of the sanctuaries. And if the area is a special or let's say a scheduled area, okay, for those special areas, the sanctuaries in those regions again have to be managed by the wildlife warden, but they have to consult Gram Sabha. Okay, the Gram Sabhas have to be consulted. Fine. Now the fourth provision is exemption for live elephants. Okay, now by the way, those of you who have let's say joined right now or who are watching this only lecture, we've already covered the Elephant Whisperers documentary in a more comprehensive manner. Please see that if you want to read more about elephants. Let's say what is the difference between Asian elephant, African elephants, and all the updates related to elephants, right? So here, what is the exemption here? That the transfer or let's say the transport of live elephants has been allowed, okay, for religious or any other purposes, right? And this will be done as per the procedure which is prescribed again by central government. So this exemption is for live elephants. Please make sure this is elephants. They can just confuse you. Let's say they write flamingos, they write rhinoceros, tigers. No, the exemption is for live elephants. Fine. Then there are relaxations, etc., which are also given. Okay, so the act says that filmmaking, etc., can be carried out. Okay, so permits, etc., can be granted. The filmmaking can be given. Activities like let's say grazing, okay, or let's say selling of minor forest produce, etc. Many of these activities, livestock, okay, for the local communities can be carried out, okay, in a regulated manner, okay. So that is one. So these two things have been thus. There are some relaxations also, and by the way, these are for the local communities which are residing, okay. The local communities which are residing, they will be allowed these let's say activities, and for them they would not be required to have a permit per se, okay. Filmmaking etc is will be allowed. Of course the relevant permissions have to be taken for that. Fine. Now this part is very interesting. Captive animals. Now let's say if somebody has few captive animals and they want to surrender those captive animals to the government, right? So initially what used to happen, they were anticipating some cash or monetary rewards, okay. But now it says that if you surrender these captive animals to the state government, number one, you do not get any money. You're not liable to be paid any money. Second, that becomes the property of the state government. So two things, no money. So no money would be given. And second is that it becomes the property of the state government. By the way, the property of the state government or the property etc, wildlife animals being the property, was asked this year in the exam, right? So after this lecture, again go back, see the previous year questions and understand many questions on Wildlife Protection Act, on the schedules, what a schedule means etc have been already asked, okay. So captive animals, again I am repeating, no money is liable to be paid if you surrender the captive animal to the government. One. Second, it becomes the property of the state government. Fine. Then of course these provisions are provided so that we can implement sites better, okay. That is the main idea, that we want to implement the provisions of sites better, which is why we are having all of this. All right. And the last is penalties, okay. The penalties in general or the fines have been increased, okay. We'll not go into how much is the increase or the quantum of increase, but overall just remember overall, okay. So let's say the fine was X rupees, it has been increased to X plus like 100, just for your understanding. Overall just understand the penalties or the fines have increased, right? So that is one thing that you need to also understand, right? So be it general violation or any specific violation, the penalties have increased. So let me quickly recap, okay, because this is again an important aspect. A question can be asked here. Number one, schedules have been rationalized. You had 6 schedules, now you have 4 schedules. Second, for the control of alien invasive species, the power lies with central government, not the state government. Third, control of sanctuaries, there are wildlife wardens which are appointed by the state government, okay. They will be doing the control, and if it's a special or scheduled area, they have to consult Gram Sabha. Exemptions will be for this live elephants, let's say for they have to be transported, moved for a religious purpose, again as per the provisions by the central government. Relaxations for filmmaking, okay, and for certain activities for the local communities. The local communities will not be required to have a permit etc. Captive animals, if somebody surrenders, okay, so no money, then they will not be given any money. Second, it becomes the property of the state government. It actually helps to implement the provision of sites, and by the way, recently COP19 of sites has also happened, okay. This also makes both these things, one Wildlife Protection Act and also sites important. I will be covering this again in high yielding topics when we cover conventions and important protocols. Fine. So sites will be covered there, especially this update, COP19 of sites, okay. So you can also follow these lectures in that flow. A lot of the current affairs and static will be covered here, okay, in our YouTube series, right. Then you have penalties. I've also already told the general and the specific penalties have been increased, right. So this is all you need to specifically know to understand Wildlife Protection Act in a lot of good detail, the static part of it, okay. So I've told you all these relevant important things and the amendments which have happened to the Wildlife Protection Act, right. So now again, those of you who want to avail the prelims crash course for environment can do so. You will get access to all these lectures at one go, where things are covered very comprehensively, okay, and you'll also get the notes as well. So both the lectures and the notes will complement your preparation, right. Now because this Wildlife Protection Act was slightly longer topic, so I've only included this in the first part. Then I'll be covering the updates on Forest Conservation Rules 2022, amendments on Biological Diversity Acts in the subsequent parts, okay. So these small lectures will keep you steady. You can quickly revise them while, let's say, having a meal, or quickly, let's say, if you have a break, etc. You can quickly watch them, okay, and they will be very useful for quick revision, okay. I'll be meeting you very shortly. Till then, all the best. Thank you.